Today's scripture, the inclusive Hebrew scriptures from Genesis 2, 4b to 9, and 15 to 18, and 2:25 to 3:13. At the time when our God made the heavens and the earth, there was still no wild bush on the earth, nor any wild plant sprung up, for our God had not yet sent rain to the earth, and there was no human being to till the soil. Instead, the flow of water would Our God planted a garden to the east in Eden, land of promise, and placed in it the earth creature that had been made. Then our God caused every kind of tree, enticing to look at and good to eat, to spring up from the soil. In the center of the garden was the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Then our God took the earth creature and settled it in the Garden of Eden so that it might cultivate and care for the land. Our God commanded the earth creature, "You may eat as much as you like from any of the trees in the garden, except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You must not eat of that tree, for on the day you eat from that tree, that is the day you will die. Yes, die." Then our God said, "It is not good for the earth creature to be alone. I will make a fitting companion for it." Now, the woman and the man were both naked, though they were not ashamed. But the snake was even more smooth and most cunning of all the animals that God had made. The snake asked the woman, "Did God really tell you not to eat from the trees in the garden?" The woman answered the snake, "We may eat fruit from all the other trees in the garden, but the fruit from the tree in the middle of that garden, God said, 'Don't eat it and don't touch it, or you will die.'" The snake said to the woman, "Die? You won't die. God knows well that on the day that you eat it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like the gods, knowing good and evil." The woman knew that the tree was enticing to the eye, and now that the fruit was good to eat, that it was desirable for the knowledge it could give. So she took some of its fruit and ate it. She gave some also to the man beside her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were both naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. When they heard the sound of our God walking in the garden in the cool of the evening, the woman and the man hid from our God's presence among the trees in the garden. Our God called to the man, "Where are you?" "I heard you walking in the garden," replied the man. "I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid." "Who told you of nakedness? Have you eaten from the tree whose fruit I forbade you to eat?" The man replied, "It was the woman you put beside me. She gave me the fruit, and I ate it." Then our God asked the woman, "What have you done?" And the woman replied, "The snake tempted me, so I ate." There ends the reading.
Friends, will you join me in prayer? Gracious, holy, loving God, may our words and our thoughts and our reflections be a blessing to you this day and every day, always. Amen. Yes, because friends, we have a problem. And our problem is biblical interpretation from 1,600 years ago. Our problem is Augustine. Now, many people have problems with Paul and Paul's letters, and most of those people who have done studying of theology also have a problem with Augustine. Yeah. He was at the end of the 4th and the beginning of the 5th century. Augustine, or Augustine of Hippo. We're always trying to deal with the Caesar Augustus, so he's Augustine to not confuse the two. Anyway, we don't need the whole history. He is clearly a big deal because the things that he said and he wrote continue to be taught and accepted as fact, as theological fact today. Augustine, saint, was reading a Latin translation of Paul's Greek letters to the Romans. And here's where it gets a little wonky. We're going to just breeze on past it, so if it doesn't make sense, it's okay. It'll be catch up. In our typical New Revised Standard Version, it says, "Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death came through sin, so sin spread through all because all have sinned." That's what ours says, translated from the Greek. The Latin Vulgate, I should have put this on the board, I didn't, that Augustine was reading said, "Therefore, sin came into the world through one man, and death came through sin and spread in him. All have sinned." Anyway, it's these little nuanced words where in him versus because of, and Augustine looked at this and he was like, this sin came into the world through and in and only because of Adam. And it's a little wonky to get those. I've watched church business meetings, large church business meetings, where they've argued over the word shall and may and must, and hours have gone by. But each of these little words seem to make a difference to different people. Augustine had two issues. He was in a fight with another theologian who argued that people were born good and had a desire to do good. And the second thing is that Augustine, we're an adult crowd here, Augustine seemed to really enjoy women and sex and felt real guilty about it and wanted everyone else to feel real guilty about it too. So, he developed this idea of original sin. Based on it coming through Adam and being part of every person who was born. Now, I want you to take all of those pieces on your own and remember that Jesus, not born of a man, through normal conception practices, had no original sin. Do you see where original sin comes from, according to Augustine? It's on the list of why he's not our favorite. Augustine has this idea of original sin that he found in Romans and then just shoots it back through time, through all of the pages, and drops it right onto the story of Adam and Eve. The story we read today. And I'm starting here because Augustine's understanding of the beginning of sin, of original sin, is so ubiquitous, so well known, so standard, that it is a joke, that it is how it is taught, that Eve and the apple, and it was probably not an apple, and the snake, who was, by the way, definitely not Satan, and the fall are all just part of our cultural understanding. They just come up all the time. So, if we ignore our 15th century theologian and we ignore Paul and just take our story as it is, as it has been passed down to us and translated, because it's always translated, if we look at the story as a myth about what it means to be human and to interact with God, to live in this world, to see the story that is still happening and not a single moment in time that changed everything, maybe then our story can offer us something new. We're doing away with original sin. Okay? We're just going to forget. And their purpose was to be beautiful and be full of delicious fruit. And there were two in particular that were spoken about. The garden, the tree of life, which is said that it was in the midst of the garden. It may not be the exact center of the garden. It just meant in the midst of. But certainly not on the edges. And then the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which doesn't seem to be given an exact location. The ancient rabbis wondered if the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they wondered where it was. Since it was the tree of life that had a description, the tree of life in the middle of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil, wondered if they were next to each other. Were they near each other? Were they far from each other? Was the tree of knowledge of good and evil marked so that they knew that was the one they weren't supposed to touch? Or did it just blend in with everything else and they were supposed to guess? And many have assumed that the first humans were made immortal, that they could not die. But it could also be that the tree of life functioned like a fountain of youth, that in a way it refreshed and rejuvenated the body over and over again so one could essentially live forever. One way to think about the tree of knowledge of good and evil might be that it bestowed some knowledge to think morally, to contemplate and make decisions, to know right from wrong. And another way might be that the fruit from the tree gave them access, made real all of the experiences between birth and death. Everything from A to Z. And in that, thus recognizing the reality of their inevitable death, which they seem to have not known at the beginning. Now, you might be wondering, why would God put a tree that they're not supposed to eat in the middle of a garden? But, did you ever put something on the counter and assume that your child or the dog would never be able to reach it? And then they did. You didn't even think you had to tell them not to touch it. You just didn't think they would go there. There was a video a couple weeks ago of actress Alicia Silverstone walking down a sidewalk asking what this fruit is that she picked out of somebody's yard and started eating, because it looked like a tomato when you bit into it, but it certainly didn't taste like a tomato. And the internet decided, what is wrong with you? How did you think you could walk by someone's street and just pick some fruit out of their yard and start eating it? The other thing they decided, the internet, was that it's a Jerusalem cherry, which I learned is part of the nightshade family, which is poisonous. And I'm sure whoever planted this tree or in their yard didn't put it there as a temptation for Alicia Silverstone to walk by or other random people. They just thought it looked nice and that this would be the right place for it. And everything was perfect, and there's no way someone is going to walk by and pick a fruit out of their yard and randomly start eating it. By the way, she's okay. And I think when we come to this story, I know, we assume that these people, these humans, are adults, because that is the way our pictures are drawn and painted. But friends, they are brand new humans. They might be hours or days or weeks, maybe a week old. They know nothing. They are brand new humans who haven't experienced loss. They haven't gotten in a fight, celebrated anything. They probably haven't even told the first joke yet. They are children in adult and grown bodies. They're like squirrels, moving through the world joyfully, picking fruit off of trees, and meeting all of the new animals. So it's no surprise when the snake shows up, they have no context for how he would manipulate them. Now, again, the snake is not evil. He is not Satan. The snake is a rabble-rouser. The snake is a trickster. And most religious traditions, there we go. Most religious traditions have a animal, a god, who has extreme intellect, who plays tricks on the people, who defies the rules that are set for society. They include Loki and Anansi and Coyote, and they are clever. And Snake seems to know how very, very careful Eve was and had been around that one tree. Our tricksters are made this way. We don't know where they come from. They're not made, they're just made to upset the system a little. I don't know why. They just exist. We have to accept they just exist. So when the snake shows up and meets with Eve, we'll go back to this picture because I like it. Meets with Eve and asks, did God really say you can't eat from any of the trees? And she says, no, we can eat from all of them, just not that one, and don't touch it or we'll die. I know. God didn't really say that they couldn't touch it. Yeah. And the snake says, no, that's not true. Go touch it. See, you won't die. You didn't die. Just pick one fruit. And now that you have the one fruit, you might as well try it. God won't let you die. And if the man and woman are like children, Snake is essentially that neighborhood kid who shows up at your house, triple dog dares you to do something, and is nowhere to be found when the ball has gone through the window, or your tongue is stuck to the light pole, or you did, in fact, shoot your eye out. And if this story is just about sin, it seems the first sin would be Snake, manipulating and taking advantage of these two naive fools. When the man and the woman ate of the fruit, they broke their world. I didn't say the whole world, their world. They broke the relationship they had with each other and hid themselves. They put up barriers against each other. They blamed each other. And by blaming the snake, they broke their relationship with the natural world too. They broke their relationship with themselves because they realized what they had done wrong and that they were no longer trustworthy for themselves. Their eyes were open to their inevitable death. The world became fragile and temporal. When they ate the fruit, they realized all kinds of things. And they broke their relationship with God. And in shame, they hid. Now, if you know children, there will come a point where something you were certain, like the things you put on the counter, there are certain they couldn't get to, become the means of making art on walls. And as you know, that action might start as just joyfully living in the world. It's mostly your fault because you left something accessible. And one day, Their actions become intentional, maybe hurtful. Pushing a sibling, telling a lie, missing curfew. And to be fair, in either case, whether it's intentional or not, it breaks your world. It breaks your trust. Nothing can ever be the same. Like I told the kids, it doesn't mean there's not love there. It means that maybe you need to reorganize your house and put the markers or the toilet paper up higher. Or you ask more questions before they leave for an event. Or you change the rules. When God found the man and the woman in the garden, there were consequences, but there was still love. God became a seamstress and made clothes and gave them a new home where they didn't have the temptation of that tree, and there was still love. While they ran and hid, God preserved their relationship. As children grow, they learn about the world outside themselves. It can happen at any age. They learn about their impact on the world and the world's impact on them. You become aware of your own limitations. You realize that you can get hurt, and one day, you realize that you and everyone around you are finite creatures. You realize death. That is the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It comes to all of us as we grow. The knowledge of the good and evil, the knowledge of death and the recognition of yourself, your consciousness of your place in the world, and your place with other people, and your place with creation. Not just the recognition of death, but the recognition of pain and hurt and grief and anger is also the recognition of hope and relief and reconciliation and joy and celebration. We have them both. And with all that you see, and with all of that, you see that life is finite and fragile, broken and going to break again and again, and it is precious and beautiful. The feeling of loving another person and the grief of losing them in some way. The bittersweet feeling of watching your children grow up and then grow independent and then need you less and have heartbreaks of their own. And the joy of dreams fulfilled and the wrenching of dreams that will never be. The wonder at a sunset and the rage over children who are killed in war or in their schools. The question is, would we give that all up? Every fragile and precious bit, would you give it all up? Would you go back and be the angel and the ear of the man and the woman and tell them not to eat that fruit? To just live in joyful naivete without knowing the great joys and all the heartbreaks and all the healings in between. And it would be nice. Oh my God. It would be nice, but we can't. And maybe where there was once two trees standing next to each other, they have grown up and intertwined into one. Or maybe the rabbis say there was always one tree and that it just split and grew two types of fruit. Because whatever it looked like to the man and the woman and snake, for us, life and death, good and evil, shame and vulnerability, joy and pain, they are all wrapped up in each other. That is what it is to have life in these human bodies made of dust and water and breath. Whatever perfection we might have been made for, we are going to break it again and again. We are going to hurt, and we're going to hurt each other, And we're going to lose trust, and we're going to be disappointed, and we're going to feel shame, and we're going to hide, and we're going to break relationships with each other, and with ourselves, and with creation, and with God. But what if they had, in fact, eaten the fruit? And instead of running to hide, they stood there naked and vulnerable before God and said, yep, that's what happened. Yep, I did that. I ate that fruit. What if they had taken some responsibility? What if they had tried to keep the relationship? What if they had centered their relationship instead of trying to get away with it, trying to save themselves, trying to rescue themselves, instead of blaming each other or pretending and hiding away as if they could actually hide? What if this isn't a story about what happened one time, how sin entered the world, but this is about what happens over and over again? What if this is a warning and a lesson telling us that nothing is saved when we run and hide, when we pretend, when we build barriers between us and creation, when we lose our vulnerability, when we pass the blame to someone else? What if it's a warning to check ourselves when we respond in fear or shame or anger? What if the story is reminding us that we can choose relationships? Because we are going to break things. We're going to break hearts and trust and earth and relationships. But it's about what we do next. Do we run and hide? Do we build barriers and walls and masks? Do we blame others? Maybe. Maybe it's telling us that nothing has to stay broken. It's hard and it's painful to heal, but it's the breaking and the healing, and in that we can see the beauty and the preciousness of the world. In growing, we discover again and again that life and knowledge of ourselves and the world, of our place in the world, are bound up together. They have made and become one fruit that we all eat a little bit of throughout our lives as we grow and become. But the tree and the fruit aren't the point. The breaking isn't the point. The point is the healing. The point is being vulnerable. The point is relationships woven together, broken and healing. And may that give us hope and courage in these days and days ahead.